Carlos had always been impulsive. When he met Bianca, a beautiful young woman half his age, he felt an uncontrollable attraction. His marriage to Helena had become monotonous, and Bianca was a breath of fresh air. What began as a harmless flirtation soon morphed into an all-consuming obsession. Helena, a practical woman, managed their finances diligently, ensuring they lived comfortably. Carlos, on the other hand, had never been responsible with money. When Bianca entered his life, he became even more reckless. He started by buying her expensive gifts, jewelry, designer clothes, and exotic vacations. Each transaction drained their savings, but Carlos didn't care. He was infatuated. Helena noticed the changes in their bank account and confronted Carlos. He brushed her off, blaming a series of bad investments. Suspicious, Helena began to investigate, uncovering the affair. She was devastated, but what hurt more was the realization that Carlos had squandered their life savings on this young mistress. Determined to confront him, she decided to wait until he came home that night. Carlos was with Bianca in a luxurious hotel suite when his phone buzzed with a message from Helena. "We need to talk. Come home now." Annoyed but unafraid, Carlos left Bianca, promising to return soon. As he drove home, a dense fog settled over the road. Visibility was poor, and Carlos struggled to navigate the winding path. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. Swerving to avoid it, Carlos lost control and crashed into a tree. Dazed but unharmed, he stumbled out of the car, looking for the figure he had almost hit. There was no one in sight. He made his way home on foot, the fog thickening around him. When he finally arrived, the house was eerily quiet. Helena sat in the living room, her face pale and eyes hollow. "We need to talk," she repeated, her voice a whisper. Carlos felt a chill run down his spine. "I know," he stammered. "I've made some mistakes, but we can fix this." Helena's gaze bore into him. "It's too late, Carlos. You've destroyed everything." Before he could respond, the room grew cold and the lights flickered. Shadows danced on the walls, forming grotesque shapes. Carlos felt a presence behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing. "Helena, what's going on?" he asked, panic rising in his chest. "You brought this upon us," she said, her voice no longer her own. "You spent our money, betrayed our vows. Now you must pay." Carlos backed away, but the shadows closed in, whispering his name. He felt invisible hands grabbing at him, pulling him towards the darkness. "Helena, please. Help me," he screamed. Helena stood motionless, her expression void of emotion. "It's too late," she repeated. The shadows enveloped Carlos, dragging him into a void of darkness and despair. He screamed, but no sound escaped his lips. The last thing he saw was Helena's cold, empty eyes. Carlos awoke in the same hotel suite where he had left Bianca. Confused, he looked around, expecting her to be there. Instead, the room was empty, and an oppressive silence filled the air. He tried to call her, but his phone was dead. Desperate, he left the hotel and wandered the fog-covered streets. The world around him seemed distorted, like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Every corner he turned, he saw fleeting glimpses of shadows and heard whispers that chilled his soul. Returning home, he found the house abandoned. Dust covered the furniture, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. It was as if years had passed. In the living room, he found a note in Helena's handwriting. "This is your penance. Live with the ghosts of your sins." Carlos realized he was trapped in a purgatory of his own making. The shadows were the spirits of those he had wronged, including Helena. Every night, they tormented him, replaying his betrayals and indulgences. The more he tried to escape, the tighter their grip became. Meanwhile, Bianca moved on with her life, oblivious to Carlos's fate. She found a new lover, leaving behind the memory of the older man who had once showered her with gifts. Helena's spirit, however, lingered in the house, watching over Carlos's eternal torment. Years passed, and the house gained a reputation for being haunted. Locals spoke of the cursed man who wandered the streets, his face etched with regret and despair. They said he was doomed to relive his mistakes forever, a cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and the high cost of indulgence. One night, a young couple dared to enter the abandoned house. They had heard the stories but didn't believe them. As they explored the darkened rooms, they felt a presence, an oppressive sadness that seemed to seep from the walls. In the living room, they found a dusty photograph of Carlos and Helena. The air grew cold, and the shadows began to stir. The couple heard a whisper, "Leave this place." Terrified, they fled, leaving behind the cursed house and its tormented inhabitant. Carlos watched them go, his eyes hollow and his soul burdened with eternal sorrow. In the end, Carlos's story became a local legend, a grim reminder of the dangers of giving into temptation and betraying those who love you. The house stood as a monument to his downfall, a place where the past refused to die and the shadows of regret reigned supreme. And so, Carlos remained, trapped in a never-ending nightmare, haunted by the ghosts of his own making, a man who had lost everything for a fleeting taste of forbidden love.